Hi everyone, welcome back to the addtaxpod, the podcast where I remind you to know your worth and then add tax, period. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really appreciate you joining me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on a different podcast streaming platform, please don't forget to hit that follow button, leave a comment if that's an option, and also leave a 5-star rating. As always, if you have anything less than 5 stars, I don't want it. You can keep it, okay? It's okay. Also, just another reminder to check out my Add Tax Affirmations page. I post positive affirmations over there, self-love affirmations, positive daily reminders. So definitely check that out because I have some exciting stuff coming up with that. So if you are looking for a tool to enhance your life on a daily basis, a way to add tax on a daily basis, definitely check out that page. It'll be right up your alley because over here we love positive affirmations. I'm a big advocate for it, and just speaking to yourself positively, especially after dealing with years and years of toxicity and abuse and self-neglect. So definitely check that out if that sounds like something that's intriguing and helpful for you on your journey. So today's episode is the beginning of a 4-part series that I'm going to do for these next several episodes on my podcast about breaking out of the matrix. Now, when I say the matrix, what does that mean? That means essentially just the prison in your own mind that has been built through societal expectations, societal conditioning. Sometimes it's religious conditioning, familial conditioning, all kinds of conditioning and programming that has happened in our minds that some of us are fortunate enough to break out of. I believe that everybody's matrix looks different. Yes, we are all subjected to widely the same types of conditioning on a broader societal scale, but there are a lot of nuances that come depending on your own personal situation and your own background and all of that stuff. So I believe that everybody's matrix looks different. Not everybody is even fortunate enough to break out of their matrix. And for me, it took me 25 years until I broke out of the matrix for me. So today, I just want to start by giving an overview on talking about my experience with that and sharing that in hopes that it does resonate with some other women out there who have experienced the same thing or who are currently going through the same kind of journey, because I do recognize that there are a lot of people that are on this particular type of journey. And also, as I'm talking about the things that I have broken away from, I want to be very clear that I'm not bashing any of these things. Essentially, this is just how I started my healing journey, my self-reclamation journey, reclaiming my life, all of this stuff. I had to first break out of the matrix and tear everything down so that I could start rebuilding it. And I'm still rebuilding, but, it has to start with you snapping out of everything that you've been programmed and conditioned to believe and think and embody. So for me, my 3 core pillars of my matrix were marriage, motherhood, and Christianity. So again, before I dive in, I just want to remind everybody that if you're a mother, if you're married, if you're a Christian, or if you're all 3, this is not to bash you and your personal choices. This is not to bash religion or motherhood or marriage or any type of institution or anything. Like, that's not the goal here. So do not take offense. This is just my personal journey and my personal story. So if your story looks different, and you enjoy being a mom, or you want to be a mom, or you love being married, or you really want to get married, or you love being a vessel for Jesus or whatever, then keep doing that. I am not here to tell anybody how to live. I'm just encouraging people to choose themselves and live a life that makes them happy first and foremost, before anything else, whatever that looks like. So for me, it's going to look one way. For you, it's going to look a completely different way. There might be some overlap, but no two people are the same. So no two lives are going to look exactly the same. So, and I think that's the reason why I broke away from a lot of these things that were conditioning me because it just felt like I couldn't live life for myself. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to do with my life. Saying all that to say that this is not an attack on anybody. This is just my life. And if your life looks different and you're on a different path, then that's great. As long as it's making you happy and you're not in danger or being abused or something, okay, live your life. Pop your For me, breaking out of the matrix really started in February of this year, but there were cracks in it at the end of 2024. So it was kind of like a snowball effect for me, where it started with rejecting the idea of marriage, and then rejecting the idea of motherhood, and then rejecting the institution of Christianity. Whenever I was with my most recent ex, I was introduced to the concept of decentering men. And at first I was like, that's interesting. And I would listen to decentering men videos whenever he would get on my nerves or treat me like and stuff like that. But then I felt so much resistance because I was like, wait, this is making me not want to be with him, and he's supposed to be my husband and the father of my kids and blah, 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 blah. I can't be constantly listening to decentering men content because this is making me not like my boyfriend. So then I took a break from it. But then once I finally broke up with him, that's when I was presented with a choice to either fall back into my old ways of just trying to get back out there with dating and trying to find a man and all this stuff, or to take the route of decentering men and embark on that journey. So at first, I was falling back into my old patterns with getting on Hinge. I paid $70 for Bumble. I was listening to all these dating coaches and stuff like that because I was like, I'm going to get back out here and date again. I was listening to so much content of just different topics about men and relationships in general that I was listening to decentering men content because I didn't want to fall into the same exact situation of being in an abusive relationship, but I also still wanted to be with a man. So I was listening to dating content, but also listening to decentering men content at the same time. I ultimately resonated a lot more with the decentering men content. So I ended up embarking on that journey. That's also when I started going to therapy again as well. So I was just you know what? Maybe I should just heal and decenter men and actually focus on myself for once, because I've never done that before. So that's what I did. In the beginning of breaking out of the matrix, I felt such a wide range of emotions. I swear I went through all the stages of grief, because I was grieving my old self, my old life, my old way of being. I was grieving all of the things that I thought were true. I was grieving the loss of the relationship and just a future that I had planned for myself, and being a mom and being a wife. I had grieved my relationship with Jesus Christ because I was wow, for 25 years, I really was trying to be a good Christian girl and be a soldier for the Lord and stuff. So now I had to grieve that whole part of my identity. And then there came resentment towards all the institutions and people that played a part in perpetuating that conditioning against me, if that's the word. I felt betrayed because I was how have I been walking around this long and nobody told me that I could live life a completely different way and be a lot happier? I felt so angry for a while, just walking around with anger because I was just like, how's not everybody seeing what I'm seeing? Like, I was just so angry because I was just like, it felt like my whole life was a lie. And I was like, I spent the last 25 years living a life that I literally hated. And like, what the f? But that all ended up turning into acceptance, accepting that, okay, that was the last 25 years of my life. Nothing I can do about it now except choose a different way to move forward and live the rest of my life, which also led to me just being at peace with the circumstances, being at peace with the fact that, other people aren't going to get it. A lot of people probably think that I'm crazy. Being at peace with the fact that a lot of family members are not going to accept me anymore or be as warm anymore or just care to even understand me anymore because I'm completely different. And then it turned into being happy and being really grateful with the fact that I have a second chance to just live the life that I want to live, and being really happy with the fact that it happened now instead of when I'm like 45, And I was really happy that I was able to enter 26 with like a clean slate, basically. Because for me, breaking out of the matrix also meant literally tearing everything down that I knew about myself and about life and literally blank slating it. Like just starting from ground zero. So for a while, I just kind of felt like, not like a shell, but kind of like a baby again, where it was just like, okay, everything just looks different. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just here to like learn and stuff. And again, like this only started in February. I'm still early on in my journey, but we're about to be in February again. Like, it's not really the amount of time, it's the effort that you put into the time. That's why I feel like when people say time heals all wounds, like that's not really true. Because if you're just sitting around and letting time pass by thinking that's going to heal the wounds, then like it's going to take a long time for those wounds to heal versus like proactively doing something with the time that you have. It was so important for me to feel all of those emotions and just let them come as they were. So the first pillar, as I was saying, was decentering men and marriage. This was the first illusion that I had to wake up from. And for so long, my 5-year plan had always included like becoming a wife. So So through breaking out of the matrix, I realized that marriage is a scam, and also the deep impact that romance movies, TV shows, music, etc. had on me as a girl. So all those Disney movies of the princesses and the happily ever after and all this stuff, like they really are just selling a fantasy. It's adults creating these movies and all this romance content for kids. So just realizing that it's literally just ploy for capitalism at the end of the day, because if you're selling people a fantasy, then they're going to want the whole kit and caboodle. So for instance, if I see a princess movie, I'm going to watch the movie, then I'm going to want it on DVD. Then I'm going to want to get the toys, and I'm going to want to get the dress. And then I'm going to get older, and then that's going to feed into me wanting to be a real life princess, in a sense, which is going to feed into me contorting myself so that Prince Charming will come and get me. And then it's going to feed into the dating apps and all this stuff that it just funnels us into as young girls, into teenagers, into women. So it's kind of like they have us hooked for life. And then ultimately, marriage as an institution is a whole other thing. Ever since I started decentering men, like it really is just a lot of ups and downs. Like sometimes you will fall back into it would be nice to, you know, be cuddled up with a man right now, but then it's like, at what cost, you know? Yeah, and honestly, that kind of went hand in hand with me breaking through the illusion of motherhood. And what I mean by that is me waking up from the illusion that motherhood is easy, because that's something else that they try and sell to us as young girls and women, is just that motherhood is so easy peasy, so fun being a mom and having a kid and building a family and raising them and driving them to school and going to PTA meetings and making them lunch and dinner and all this stuff, when it's like, that's not the reality for a lot of moms. Like, there's no guarantee that it's going to be fun the entire time. There are a lot of situations where moms think that it's just going to be all fun and games and cutesy wootsy, but then reality hits them and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm having pregnancy complications. Oh my gosh, my child has complications, like the financial burden of it all. Or, oh, my man is a piece of and he's not helping out with raising the kid at all. Or, oh, now we gotta get a divorce. Oh, if we're not even married. Oh, well, now he went off and had a kid with somebody else. And now I gotta take him to child support court and all this stuff. Like, it's just like, God. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they don't prepare you for when you're thinking about motherhood and making that decision. It is a lifelong decision, a lifelong commitment. And for so long, I just had it on my, essentially like my life's to-do list of just like, oh, have 2 kids, without actually thinking about the repercussions of that or what that would mean for my life. And for a really long time, I wanted to be a lawyer. So it was also me planning everything around being a mom and a wife, essentially, of like, okay, well, if I make partner, then maybe I can work from home and then have my kids, or maybe I'll just start my own law firm and I'll be able to work my own hours, or maybe I'll just take 3 to 5 years off to raise the kids, but then that means I gotta have kids back to back so I don't have to take too much time off. And then, so I'm not financially stressed. I got to be making at least 6 figures. And it's like, okay, well, now I got to think about sending my kids to private school because there's less of a chance that they're going to be subject to a school shooting event. And it's just so much. Oh, and on top of that, I got to make sure that I go to therapy and work through all of my issues so that I don't them up in the head and pass on generational trauma, because I want them to be a good human being and start off on a better foot than I had. And yeah, just all of this stuff that you have to think about that they don't tell you that you should think about, which is why we see so many kids being brought up in toxic situations, or as adults, now we have to deal with a lot of other adults out here that were not raised well, and them being horrible members of society. So now we got to deal with them. And that's a result, a lot of times, of the parents not being fit to be parents. I realized that that was just too much for me. I'm way too selfish as a person. I don't want to have to do all that preparation for some kids. I just don't. I have too many goals in life, too many aspirations, too many big dreams and hopes for myself and visions for the future that don't fit kids. Because then it's like, okay, well, now I gotta go find a man that's worth having kids with. And you really do kind of have to go into it with being prepared just to be a single mom, because you never know. Like, again, that man could turn out to be a piece of shit. He could get hit by a bus and then you're still a single mom. Like, anything could happen. Nothing is guaranteed. And I think that's part of what a lot of people miss, is that, like, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be a 2-parent household. No matter how it goes down, it's just not guaranteed. So, and I'm not willing to take that gamble of potentially being a single mom. I'm just not. And I've also had a lot of friends that are single moms, and they do a wonderful job. Whether or not I'm friends with them now, but I've had friends currently and in the past that are single moms. They do a great job, but also hearing the reality of dealing with a baby dad, dealing with going to court and child support, funding for the kid. And I'm like, there are certain women that I really commend if they do feel called to be a mom, like truly, and they've thought about everything. I commend it because it's so much work, and it's work that not everybody is well equipped to handle. And even just hearing certain things that aren't even my experience, I'm like, girl, how are you doing that? Because I would have lost my mind. I would have been like so overstimulated, so overwhelmed. Like, it is enough trying to navigate life right now. That's just not a life that I see for myself. But it really isn't impressed on us as young girls and young women to choose a path of motherhood because it's just like, oh, well, you're a woman, so like that's what you're supposed to do. Like, says who? And thankfully, I stumbled upon a community of a lot of child-free women who are confident in their choice and confident in their decisions and who are loving life being child-free. And it really inspired me to be like, I can live life very happily and not being a mom. But that's also another thing that I had to grieve, was just like a whole fantasy that I had in my mind about this perfect motherhood journey, and realizing that, number one, again, it's not guaranteed to have a perfect motherhood journey. And then number two, that just grieving the fact that like I'm not going to be a mom to human kids at all. I definitely want to have a lot of pets and stuff, but just to human kids. Kids are great. I just don't see myself dealing with them on a daily basis for the rest of my life. I just don't. And also, this society in America is going to hell in a handbasket. So I'm like, do I even want to bring kids into this? No. Like, having to sit my child down and being like, okay, some people are going to call you and they're not going to be black. And it's because of the color of your skin. I don't feel like having that conversation with a kid, or being like, oh yeah, there's a lot of men out here that are going to try and take advantage of you, so here's what you should do. Or, oh yeah, there's school shooters out here, so here's what you're supposed to do. Like, that's just a lot to have to put a child through. And I'm just not willing to do that for myself. I don't want to have those conversations. I just don't. Yeah, so I had to decenter motherhood and the idealization of that and everything that comes with it. One of the biggest reasons is honestly that I don't want to be connected to a man for eternity. Like, it's not worth it. And also, my body is going to change and I don't know how it's going to change. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. It's just not. So that's why I really commend the women that do go through with being a mom, especially to multiple kids. Like, y'all are strong. And I think that a lot of moms don't get all the respect that they are due and that they deserve. Like, moms really do deserve their flowers because they put up with so much and they've been through so much. And I think that's one of the issues with society in all and across the world, is that moms are not respected enough. Moms are not given enough support emotionally, financially, all that stuff. They're not given enough support, and they don't get enough credit for what they do because it's literally a whole second full-time job. Yeah, I think it's just another example of how women in general are undervalued, because it's like, a man can't bring a child into this world, but men have all the privilege in the world. But the women that are literally putting their entire lives on hold, at risk, on the back burner, to bring some kids into the world and contribute in a much more substantial way than a man running some corporate business. It just shows where we are still at as a society with undervaluing the contributions that women make and the sacrifices that women make when they do become moms, because it is a sacrifice. So, yeah. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into me walking away from Christianity and the church. So, we'll be right back. Okay, let's get right back into this episode. The third pillar in my matrix that I had to wake up from was the illusion that the only way to be a good person and to live a good life is to be a Christian. So this happened kind of as a result of decentering men. It was one sentence in a video that I heard, and the lady had said something about how with decentering men, you also have to decenter religion or Christianity. And she was like, but y'all aren't ready for that conversation, which made me go, what does she mean by that? Growing up in a conservative Christian household, that was a really radical statement for me to hear. So I was just like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, because my entire life I was always told not to question Christianity, not to question God, not to question Jesus, and to just stay in my lane, you know? So I don't know if I want to see what that lady's talking about. But, you know, curiosity got the best of me. And I was like, let me find out. Because I was so serious about decentering men that I was like, maybe she's onto something, you know? And maybe that's something that I need to consider at least. So the first thing that I was reminded about was just the blatant and disgusting amount of racism that Western Christianity was built on. So just how it was used during enslavement in America and the transatlantic slave trade, the Crusades, all of this stuff across history that I was like, for that reason alone, started having me make a side eye towards Christianity again, because I was like, why am I supporting this? Especially when we still see white supremacists upholding these good Christian values today as well. And these are supposed to be the same good Christian values that I'm supposed to live by. Like, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. My entire life, I was forced to practice a religion that conditioned me to believe that I don't have a choice over what I want to believe and how I want to experience life. So it was essentially people just telling me that, hey, how you're supposed to live your life is laid out in the Bible. So just follow that, or listen to the pastor, or read a devotional or whatever, and that's supposed to tell you what you're supposed to do. And it's just like, so I don't get to decide how I want to live my life? Yeah, at the crux of it was just like the concept of devout servitude and how I'm supposed to give all the credit to Jesus, a male deity, or blame the devil, who also is a male religious figure. Like, blame the devil for everything that goes bad. So either way, I'm like blaming or giving credit to some male figure. So that in itself, I was just kind of like, that is male-centered. Living life for so long, feeling like I was just serving Jesus in the sky, and that's the only reason why I'm here, was to just serve the Lord and praise the Lord and all of this stuff, and like there's no other reason why I'm here, like that's it, just made me really paranoid about messing up or not being the perfect servant, or not making it to heaven, or oh my gosh, is the devil tempting me? Is the devil watching my every move? And like, oh no, am I gonna go to hell? It just made me so paranoid about my daily actions. And because I was so conditioned to just be a servant for Jesus, it also made me more susceptible to being a servant and filling this servant role in the lives of the men in my life. Like the amount of times that I've been in a position where I was doing a man's laundry, cooking for a man, cleaning for a man, laying on my back for a man, just because I felt like that's what I needed to do to serve them, essentially. But it's like, okay, inherently humans aren't wired to just serve. So where does that come from? Decades of me feeling like as a woman, one of my only purposes in life is just to serve. Also, when I was in the Matrix as a Christian, I was a lot meaner to people and a lot meaner to myself. And I believe that that was because of, again, this is just in the churches that I've been to, and I've been dragged to a lot. And the community of Christians that I was a part of. There was just a lot of homophobia, transphobia, internalized misogyny. Those are like the big three that I experienced, but just being so hateful towards groups of people and also being hateful towards myself being a woman and having that internalized misogyny, because there was so much misogyny within the church and so much, again, homophobia and transphobia, that looking at somebody that had a different sexual orientation than myself, just being like, oh, well, they're weird, or even as I became more accepting whenever I was like in high school, it was like a cognitive dissonance, because in my own personal life, I didn't care if somebody was gay or whatever. Like, it didn't matter to me. But then again, in my own Christian community, dealing with being reprimanded for hanging out with gay people or having gay friends. So I was a lot meaner because I was so judgmental of people that didn't also subscribe to Christianity or that didn't live their life in a certain box. Additionally, I was also conditioned with a lot of other toxic belief systems that were modeled to me and that I was conditioned to believe, such as the idea that divorce is wrong and that you're supposed to stay with your man through thick and thin, no matter what. And they really take that till death do us part seriously. And also just that men are like the chosen ones and that women are supposed to be the homemakers or like props, dutiful wives, mothers, all that stuff. Like in the churches that I was a part of, the deacons and the pastors were 9 times out of 10 a man. The chosen ones that went to the, what do they call it? I forget what the college, like what the schooling is called, but the ones that were called by God to be a preacher and to be a deacon or, whatever. And then it's like the wife just ends up being like the mother of the church. The first wife that like sits in the front pew and is just supposed to make him look good and is like basically just like a glorified prop while he's up in the pulpit preaching a bunch of lies and stuff. Half of these preachers, they're out here cheating anyway. So it's like you're just having her sit there and embarrassing her in front of the whole congregation, when it's like you should not be up there given a place of power, being just handed status just because you felt like you were called by God to like lead all these people. Why? Because you're a man? Because you got between your legs, like you feel like God chose you because of that? Because most times they don't have a valid reason, and a lot of times I swear it's just them telling themselves in their head that like, oh, this is my calling. Even in like the music and stuff, like the choir directors, mostly men, the band, mostly men. Like it's such a male dominated space that like the women just become like the decorations and stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, pretty things to look at and for men to oogle over, because you think that the church is the one place that you can go as a woman and be treated fairly, then you're sorely mistaken. Again, just my experience with the ones that I've been to, but I'm obviously not going to name the ones, but yeah. It's not any different than the rest of the world. Let me tell you that. A lot of wrongdoings in my experience were also justified by biblical teachings. The one main example that I'm going to give in this episode is that spanking children is okay. Now, for my entire life, I thought that spankings just happened to everybody and that that's just how it was supposed to go. But then I realized that, like, oh my gosh, a lot of people didn't get spanked as kids. But I feel like I'm not just going to say in the black church, because I've heard experiences from white people as well that have gotten spanked growing up too. So I don't know. I think it's just across the board, because I recently came across a Harvard study that made me realize that, like, this is not just a black church thing, but it is something that is normalized in the black church. And that's my experience with spankings. But yeah, a lot of people justify it with the Bible. And it's funny because you know who else justified beating people with the Bible? Enslavers, white enslavers and colonizers who justified beating enslaved black people during enslavement. So, like, okay, we can all justify whatever we want with the Bible, okay? Being spanked as a child led me to developing severe mental health issues, such as anxiety, severe depression, poor coping mechanisms like vaping and drinking, and just being hyper vigilant of threats. Like, I did not have a proper way to regulate myself. And in the Harvard study, which I will link in the description below, but the Harvard study shows that spanking elicits a similar response in children's brains to more threatening experiences like sexual abuse. So because of the findings of the study, I believe that this is why when experiencing situations of abuse that came to me later on in life, that's why I was so desensitized to what was happening to me and never knew what to do in those situations, because I had already been preconditioned just from getting spanked and just what it did to my brain as a child. And in the church, they normalize it so much because they don't talk about healthy ways to deal with things. Like, again, everything is just, well, what does the Bible say? Oh, spank your kids, they find a scripture for it, and then that's what you're supposed to do. And then everybody does it. And then now we end up with people like me. But yeah, getting spanked also led me to being so sneaky as I got older and landed me in a lot of sketchy situations. But then I would like wrestle with feeling like a bad Christian girl, because I was like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but like also I want to do it. And a lot of times in my experience with the Christian community, it was just like, don't do this, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't cuss, all of these things, without actually explaining and having a genuine conversation about the damaging effects that these things can have on like your mind, your body, your spirit. It's just like, don't do it. So then of course, like that's going to make anybody more curious of like, okay, well, why shouldn't I do it? And then trying it, seeing that you like it, and then doing it some more. And not even seeing that you like it, but like seeing that like, oh, this like is a way to soothe, because I've never been taught how to like soothe myself properly. Yeah, when it came down to sex, like I was living my life on eggshells and feeling like nothing good would happen to me, or that my blessings would be blocked, etc., and that I would be going to hell. Jesus was gonna come down and give me a spanking. Instead of being discerning about who I had sex with and making informed decisions, I was making fear-based decisions. So I didn't know how to speak up for myself. And again, if I was thinking that I was a servant, if a man wanted to have sex 9 times out of 10, I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. Because I'm like, okay, if I appease him and make him happy, then he'll like me, or whatever the case may be. But then afterwards, I would have the cognitive dissonance of being like, oh my gosh, like I need to repent because I want to go to heaven. And like, what if the rapture comes and and like, you know, Jesus and yada, yada, yada. So then I would just feel really, really bad about myself, instead of, you know, where I'm at now with just being like, there's a whole spiritual side to laying down and hooking up with a man. And well, number one is just, you know, decentering men and being on that journey in the beginning stages. And then number two is just like, there's a whole spiritual side to it as well that was just never explained to me. And I always heard that like we're spiritual beings having a natural experience and stuff, but like it never resonated with me until I actually broke out of the matrix. And now I'm like, okay, because I'm so protective of my energy, why would I go and entangle that with a man just to get my rocks off? You know what I mean? The other thing was also the concept of modesty. And genetically, I do have a butt. Like, I got some junk in the trunk, okay? Whenever I was like going through puberty and everything, I was always told to cover up and not wear tight clothes. Like, I was the problem, and like my body was a problem because the church is so male centered. And realistically, it's because the men in the church can't stop staring at butts no matter where they are. I can't, you guys. But yeah, this led me to feeling like I didn't want to have a butt because I was like, I now have to wear these ugly, loose clothes or like a long sweater, even though it's hot outside or it doesn't go with the outfit or whatever. And clothes that just didn't make me feel confident as a teenager, or like short skirts. Like, I didn't want to have a butt because then I wouldn't have to worry about short skirts riding up in the back, which was always a thing. And yeah, it just made me hate my body. Like, it caused, I guess, would that be body dysmorphia? Maybe. I gotta unpack that some more. Yeah, it's honestly one of the factors that did lead to me having an eating disorder that developed in high school because I did not want to have a butt. So I was like, maybe if I eat less, then like the fat will go away and then I can wear what I want to church. Because yeah, sometimes I would wear like more modest clothes to school just so that my parents didn't see, but then I would have like a mini skirt snuck in my backpack and then I would change into it at school because I wanted to feel confident. And it's also one of the reasons why I hated being tall for so long, because again, that was another reason why the skirts would be too short, because if they're making clothes for average height teenage girls, I was never average height from like the age of 6. So I was always like the tallest girl in my class. So I always hated being tall for so long for 2 reasons. One, because all the guys didn't have their growth spurts until like high school. And because I was so male centered from such a young age, I was like, oh my gosh, all the guys are shorter than me and they're not going to want me. And then number 2, because of the clothes and just feeling like I couldn't wear what I wanted because I like wasn't allowed or be frowned upon or wasn't modest, when it's like I can't control how tall I am. And there was also a time whenever I was older, I went natural during COVID. And at that time in my life, I was still being dragged to church and I went natural and I was told to wear a hat to church because my hair looked unkept, in quotes. And that like killed something in me with not feeling confident about my natural hair, which was such a big thing for me because I had assimilated to, white culture. I went to private school. That's a whole other story and saga. But anyways, yeah, and it just killed something in me at that age. Honestly, like in my head, that it's one of the other reasons why I started resenting going to church, because I was like, this is supposed to be the one place where I'm not supposed to care how I look, but then it turned out to be the place where I cared the most about how I looked. It led to me being so conditioned to caring about other people's opinions about how I looked. So I'm like, I gotta wear a hat because of what these old ladies in the church are gonna say about my hair because it's not pressed anymore. Like, are we being so for real? And I thought that in the one place where they talk about Jesus made me and God loves you just the way you are and yada, 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 and love your neighbor and all this stuff, like, I thought that was going to be the one place where I could show up looking however I wanted, but it wasn't. So I'm like, why would I want to go here if y'all are literally being hypocrites and lying? You do care about how people look. You don't want people to accept themselves for how they are. Like, I'm being told to cover up at everything. I might as well be a nun. Like, I can't have my butt is an issue, my hair is an issue, everything's an issue. And then once I started actually getting into acrylics, I was told that I couldn't get my nails painted black or any like dark color because I got them navy blue, and somebody freaked out and they were like, that's too close to black. And I was like, what's wrong? It's navy blue. And that person was like, but if you have your nails black, that people are gonna think that you're a witch. And I was like, oh my gosh. I've been getting acrylics for years, almost like 5-6 years now. And I had stayed away from black for so long because I was conditioned to be so concerned about what other people are going to think about a stupid nail color. So this year, I've got my nails black like 3 times already. Because I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. That person, if they want to say I'm a witch, okay, just because my nails are black, like, get a life. Go paint your nails pink or something. And it was a man that said this to me. So I was just like, why are you so concerned about what a girl is doing with her nails? Like, yeah, and that man was a Christian. So it's just like, again, what happened to the whole accepting people no matter what? Overall, I was just living life by so many rules and regulations that I had to step away from the church in my identity as a Christian so that I could finally be a blank slate and figure out what I wanted for myself and my life. And also figure out what I wanted to believe and start undoing all of the conditioning that was impressed upon me from such a young age. But yeah, whenever I was a Christian, that's when I was the most depressed. I had the most suicidal ideations, and I had the highest level of anxiety, was being a Christian and dealing with other so-called Christians. Yeah, just being a part of the church and living under all those Christian guidelines, I was not living a life of my own, a life that was fulfilling. It just felt so constricting and like I was just forced into a box, and it was starting to feel like a prison because I was living a life that other people told me that I needed to live, not a life that I wanted to live. It was just a lot of trying to keep me in my place as a girl, as a young woman, as a grown woman. And I just had enough. This was probably the most vulnerable that I've been on this podcast so far. But the takeaway from all of this is that I am living proof that you can go through all of these things, all these experiences. You can live your entire life under these conditions and programming and still come out on the other side and live a life that makes you feel good and that makes you happy. You don't have to continue on the same path. You can choose a different path and be 10 times happier. And it is so scary at first breaking through the matrix and being like, I don't know what's on the other side because this is all I've ever known. But honestly, the reward is so worth the risk. Like, it was probably the biggest risk I took. And like I said, there are so many people that like don't talk to me anymore, that literally think I'm crazy and that I've gone off the deep end. But the gag is that if I was a Christian, I would still care and seek their approval. The difference now is that I don't give a like, if you want to judge me, go ahead. You do something that is very radical and very different from what they conditioned you to believe or what they feel like you should be doing, and then everything just goes out the window. I'm just going to read what I wrote really quick. But for so long, I felt like my worth was tied to whether or not I was doing something for my man, the church, for the Lord, for my parents, etc. And it took me 25 years to remember that I'm enough just as I am. I don't gotta do for anybody. And there's so much freedom in that. Sometimes you gotta start from ground zero and build back up to where you want to be, unpack the bull, unlearn behaviors, go to therapy, block out the noise, cut people off, step away from institutions without shame. And I just want to be me. I don't want to contort myself to fit into all these labels: mom, wife, servant, Christian. Being Jasmine is more than enough. But before this year, I didn't know my worth. I was simply existing and letting people treat me any kind of way. The takeaway for you, the dear listener, is the most empowering thing you can do as a woman is live life for you, nobody else. It's possible, and it's so much more fulfilling and so much happier this way. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on all the platforms. Check out Add affirmations and stay tuned for part 2 next week. And as always, know your worth and then add tax. Take it away, theme song.